For 15 years, my parents hid me away like broken furniture whenever elite guests arrived. They told me to step back, to become entirely invisible, assuming the spotlight was not meant for a nobody. But they forgot one crucial detail. The dark is exactly where the real predators work. Tonight, a man with billions of dollars in military contracts is walking through their front door, and he is not here to drink their champagne. He is here for me. Hello, dear listeners of Vivian Revenge Stories. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for tuning in today. Unfortunately, YouTube has recently demonetized our channel, leaving us with zero budget to keep operating and producing the content you love. If you find today's story engaging, please consider supporting us with just $1 so we can pay our hardworking staff to cover their living expenses and continue bringing these revenge stories to you. You can donate easily by scanning the PayPal QR code on your screen or by clicking the PayPal link located in the description or pinned comment of this video. My name is Kayla Ray. I am 29 years old. I am a senior cybersecurity architect for the Sentinel Grid Coalition. We are commonly referred to as the SGC. You will never read about my organization in the morning paper. You will not see our executives giving interviews on financial networks. We are an independent intelligence and cyber defense coalition. We operate entirely in the shadows, existing in the negative space between military defense and private sector security. We are the invisible wall. The irony of my existence is almost poetic. Every single day, my team and I intercept catastrophic digital threats. We protect the power grids of millions of Americans from state-sponsored hackers. We secure water treatment facilities. We prevent invisible wars from burning cities to the ground. My daily reality involves classified clearances and dismantling offensive algorithms that could cripple the nation's infrastructure. Yet, if you were to attend one of my family's lavish dinner parties and ask what I do for a living, you would receive a profoundly different narrative. Kayla fixes computers in the IT department, my mother would say, waving her hand dismissively before offering you another hors d'oeuvre. It is not a misunderstanding. It is a calculated reduction. It is their way of shrinking my existence so I can fit neatly into the corner of their curated, highly superficial world. That world belongs to Marcus and Evelyn Ray. My father, Marcus, is a venture capitalist based here in Austin, Texas. He is a man constructed entirely of tailored Italian suits, loud golf course laughter, and empty corporate buzzwords. He trades on perception, not substance. My mother, Evelyn, is an architect of a far more insidious design. She engineers the perfect family aesthetic for her thousands of social media followers. To Evelyn, reality is irrelevant. The image is the absolute truth. Every photographed smile in our household is tightly choreographed. Every caption is a meticulously crafted lie. The system governing our family was established early. I remember the exact moment my role was assigned. I was 12 years old. Marcus was hosting a high-stakes pitch meeting in our living room to secure a massive round of venture capital funding. Precisely 45 minutes before the investors were scheduled to arrive, his custom, high-end projection matrix suffered a catastrophic failure. Total system crash. The house descended into absolute panic. Marcus was screaming at his assistant over the phone. Evelyn was pacing the floor, obsessing over the ruined optics of a failed presentation. I did not speak. I simply walked over to the console, sat on the floor, and got to work. I diagnosed the hardware conflict, rewired the main connection interface, and bypassed the corrupted driver using the command terminal. I brought the entire system back online with exactly 5 minutes to spare. Marcus stared at the glowing screen, exhaling a massive sigh of relief. I stood up, waiting for a simple word of acknowledgement. A nod. A thank you. Instead, the heavy oak front door chimed. The investors had arrived. Evelyn did not hesitate. She crossed the room in 3 strides and grabbed my upper arm. Her grip was iron, but her voice remained perfectly flat, devoid of any heat or emotion. "Go up to the attic, Kayla," she instructed, her eyes already looking past me toward the door. Messy children should not get in the way of adults working. There was never any physical abuse in the Ray household. There were no bruises to hide. There were no screaming matches echoing down the hallways. The violence inflicted upon me was entirely quiet. It was the cold, sterile removal of my existence. It was the absolute deprivation of recognition. They did not punish me with anger. They punished me by erasing me. And then, there is the glaring contrast. My younger sister. Chloe is 25 years old. She is the undeniable golden child, the gleaming centerpiece of Evelyn's digital gallery. Chloe is currently playing the role of Chief Executive Officer for a trendy meditation application startup. Marcus poured an obscene amount of capital into her public relations campaign. Her face is plastered on digital billboards across downtown Austin, selling packaged digital enlightenment to stressed executives. The reality is completely different. Out of sheer curiosity, I once audited the back-end architecture of her application. It is completely hollow. It is a fragile, poorly coded shell sitting on rented servers, built entirely on scraped data protocols and stolen open-source libraries. It possesses zero structural integrity. But in the Ray family, the surface is the only metric of value. Chloe sparkles under the camera flashes, so she is the sun. I operate in the silent dark, so I am fundamentally nothing. I stopped trying to explain who I was a long time ago. When I turned 22 years old, I finally accepted a harsh, liberating truth. My family's blindness toward me is not the result of a lack of information. It is a deliberate, active choice. They choose not to understand what I do because acknowledging my capability would require them to admit that the world does not revolve around their fragile egos. So I stopped fighting. I surrendered to the shadows. I allowed them to keep their comforting illusion. I let them believe I was just the quiet, unremarkable IT girl lingering in the background. I let them push me into the dark, completely unaware that the dark is where I am most dangerous. The Austin mansion was vibrating with a frantic, caffeinated energy. For the past 48 hours, the estate had been subjected to a flawless, military-grade staging operation. Caterers in stark white uniforms were arranging microscopic pieces of seared tuna onto slate platters. Florists were frantically adjusting geometric centerpieces made of rare orchids, trying to achieve a look that screamed effortless wealth rather than desperate try-hard. It was a symphony of elite pretense, and Marcus was the manic conductor. The catalyst for this orchestrated chaos was a single guest. Tonight, the Ray household was opening its doors to General Vance Sterling. Sterling was a titan. He was the former commander of the Military Cyber Warfare Division, who had recently transitioned into the private sector, taking the helm of a multi-billion-dollar defense technology conglomerate. His presence in a room could instantly legitimize any startup, anointing it with prestige and bottomless government contracts. Marcus had spent 6 months leveraging every fragile connection in his network just to get Sterling to accept the invitation to this dinner party. The objective was entirely transactional. Marcus wanted a photograph of himself shaking hands with the general to post on his business profiles, and more importantly, he wanted a massive seed investment for Chloe and her application. As the grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 7, Evelyn found me lingering near the kitchen island. She was scanning the room with the predatory gaze of a hawk, searching for anything that might shatter her perfect aesthetic. Her eyes landed on my plain black turtleneck and dark trousers. A brief shadow of profound distaste crossed her face. "Kayla, perfect timing," she said, her voice sharp and clipped. "I need you to go down to the basement. Take over the security and audio control room. Ensure the ambient background music loops flawlessly, and double-check that the guest wireless network does not drop even a single packet." She stepped closer, reaching out to adjust a stray collar on a passing waiter before looking back at me. "And please, stay down there for the duration of the evening. Your outfit simply does not meet the guest standard tonight, and we cannot afford any awkward distractions when the general arrives. We need absolute perfection." "Understood," I replied, my tone flat. I did not argue. I did not sigh. I simply turned and walked away. The basement control room was a cold, windowless concrete bunker housing the smart home servers of the mansion, alongside the security arrays and multimedia hubs. It was pitch black, illuminated only by the cool blue glow of 6 massive monitors mounted on the wall. I sat down in the leather ergonomic chair, feeling the familiar, comforting hum of the cooling fans. It was my natural habitat. I brought up the primary security feeds. The screens displayed high-definition, real-time views of the grand living room above me. It was like watching an interactive theater performance with the sound muted. I watched my father frantically pacing near the imported grand piano, straightening his Italian silk tie for the 5th time in 10 minutes. He was mouthing words, clearly running through his aggressive, jargon-heavy pitch. Then, the camera angle shifted to Chloe. She was positioned dead center in the room, bathed in the warm glow of the custom chandeliers. She wore a shimmering designer gown that probably cost more than a standard luxury vehicle. She was practicing her posture. I watched her tilt her head, offering a practiced, overly empathetic smile to an imaginary investor. I turned up the internal intercom audio, just enough to hear her running through her lines. "It is not just about mental wellness," Chloe rehearsed, her voice dripping with artificial sincerity. "It is about utilizing healing technology to disrupt the anxiety economy. We are synergizing mindfulness with data-driven biometrics." It was a spectacular sequence of completely meaningless syllables. I turned my attention away from the circus upstairs and looked down at my encrypted primary workstation laptop resting on the desk. The contrast between my two worlds was jarring. While my family was upstairs rehearsing empty buzzwords, my terminal was securely tunneled through 3 proxy servers into a classified military intranet. Displayed on my screen was a Priority 1, military encrypted dispatch directly from the Department of Defense. It was a highly confidential briefing regarding a code-red national security vulnerability. Specifically, it detailed a massive backdoor exploit found deep within the satellite navigation grid. It was an exploit that a hostile foreign entity had attempted to breach just hours ago. The report formally noted that the vulnerability had been successfully isolated, contained, and patched at exactly 3 o'clock this morning. I was the one who wrote the patch. My fingers had typed the command strings that sealed the breach and saved the grid, while my mother was finalizing the seating chart for her dinner party. I read through the debriefing notes, verifying that the containment protocols were holding at 100% efficiency. Satisfied, I closed the secure terminal and locked the workstation. I glanced back up at the security feeds. The fleet of valet attendants was standing at attention in the driveway. The caterers were frozen in their starting positions. The agonizing tension of the final moments before the curtain rises was palpable. I reached out and completely severed the audio connection to the family intercom. The frantic, high-pitched orders of Evelyn and the nonsensical rehearsing of Chloe instantly vanished. The basement control room plunged back into total, blissful silence. I picked up my ceramic mug, took a slow, deliberate sip of bitter black coffee, and leaned back in my chair. I focused my eyes on the driveway camera, watching the long, winding road leading up to the estate gates. The trap was set. The stage was dressed. All that was left to do was sit in the dark and count down the seconds until the beast of the defense industry walked right through their front door. On monitor number 3, the feed from the main gate flickered and came alive. A motorcade of 3 massive, matte black sport utility vehicles rolled past the wrought iron gates. These were not the sleek, polished luxury cars my father and his associates drove. These were military-grade armored transports, heavy enough to crush the imported gravel beneath their reinforced tires. They moved with predatory precision, stopping in perfect unison just inches from the front portico. I leaned closer to the glass screen, the cool blue light reflecting in my eyes. The front doors of the lead and trailing vehicles opened simultaneously. 4 men stepped out. They wore dark-tailored suits, but the rigid lines of their postures, the thick wires coiling behind their ears, and the distinct bulges under their jackets screamed special operations. They ignored the valet attendants rushing forward. They secured the perimeter in less than 10 seconds. Only when the area was locked down did the rear door of the center vehicle swing open. General Vance Sterling emerged into the Texas evening. He was a commanding figure with iron-gray hair, possessing a sheer physical density that seemed to instantly absorb all the air around him. I shifted my gaze to monitor number 1, focusing on the grand foyer. The heavy oak front doors opened, and Sterling crossed the threshold, flanked by his 2 personal guards. The cinematic quality of the moment was undeniable. 1 second, the living room was a deafening cacophony of clinking crystal, string quartet music, and hollow, high-pitched networking. The next second, total asphyxiation. The ambient chatter died so violently it felt like a vacuum had been activated. The sea of venture capitalists, tech founders, and wealthy socialites physically parted, stumbling backward to create a wide, desperate clearing for the general. From my bunker in the dark, I watched my father react. Marcus Ray saw his ultimate prize. His eyes widened, a frantic pulse of adrenaline visibly tightening his jaw. He reached out, seizing Chloe by the forearm with enough force to make her wince, and dragged her forward into the clearing. Chloe instantly deployed her most valuable commercial asset, stretching her lips into a radiant, perfectly symmetrical smile that held absolutely zero warmth or genuine emotion. Marcus launched himself into the breach. He was executing the exact approach he had practiced every day for 6 months. He marched up to the general, thrusting his manicured right hand outward. "General Sterling, what an absolute honor to welcome you to our home," Marcus projected, his voice booming with a forced, jovial authority that cracked slightly at the edges. "I am Marcus Ray. We are profoundly thrilled you could make it tonight. I want to introduce you to my daughter, Chloe. We have some truly groundbreaking technology in the wellness space to show you." Sterling stopped. He did not extend his hand. He did not even look at the hand Marcus was desperately holding suspended in the air. The general stood perfectly still, letting the suffocating silence stretch until it became pure agony. Slowly, deliberately, he reached up and removed his reading glasses, folding them with a sharp, echoing snap. He swept his cold, metallic gaze across the sprawling living room. He looked at the geometric floral arrangements, the terrified waitstaff frozen against the walls, the breathless elite guests, and finally, down at Marcus and Chloe. His expression did not register disdain. It registered complete, clinical indifference. When Sterling finally spoke, his voice was a deep, resonant baritone that required absolutely no volume to dominate the cavernous space. He bypassed every established rule of high society engagement. "Where is Kayla Ray?" The question dropped into the dead center of the room like a live grenade. On my monitor, the reaction was a masterpiece of slow-motion destruction. Evelyn, who was standing near the marble fireplace, violently flinched. The delicate crystal wineglass slipped from her fingers, shattering loudly against the floor. A dark pool of expensive red wine began to bleed into the pristine white rug. She did not even look down. Her face was entirely drained of color, her mouth slightly open in mute horror. Chloe froze entirely. Her flawless commercial smile remained plastered on her face, but her eyes darted back and forth in sheer panic, her brain entirely failing to process why the most powerful man in the room had just bypassed her entirely to demand the presence of her invisible, worthless older sister. Marcus swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing wildly in his throat. He desperately tried to reclaim control of the narrative, attempting to steer the colossal weight of the general's attention back to his carefully constructed reality. Kayla, Marcus stammered, his booming voice reducing to a thin, pathetic wheeze. He let out a forced, nervous chuckle that died instantly in the silent room. Oh, General, there must be some sort of confusion. Kayla is just our little IT girl. She is down in the basement handling the audio and internet logistics for tonight. But Chloe here, she is the chief executive officer of the application we really need to discuss. General Sterling took one single step forward. The sheer physical intimidation of the movement forced Marcus to stumble backward. The general cut him off, his words sharp and unforgiving, loud enough to ensure every single person in the room heard the execution. I did not fly 2,000 miles here to listen to you pitch garbage software, Sterling commanded, his voice striking like a physical blow. I came to meet the chief architect of the Sentinel Grid Coalition. I am here for the person who just saved our entire satellite network 8 hours ago. The ascent from the basement was a quiet, methodical transition. I did not rush. I climbed the wooden stairs with the measured, deliberate pace of someone who already knew the final outcome of the war. With every step, the muffled, suffocating silence of the grand living room above grew heavier. I pushed open the concealed door that led into the main hallway and stepped out into the blinding, warm glow of the custom crystal chandeliers. I did not wear a shimmering evening gown. I possessed no elaborate makeup, no diamonds resting on my collarbone. My plain black turtleneck and dark trousers were a stark, abrasive contrast to the sea of haute couture and tailored silk surrounding me. Yet, as I walked into the clearing the crowd had formed, I did not shrink. I moved with the absolute, unyielding posture of the only person in the building who actually held the power to dictate the terms of reality. General Sterling saw me approach. The clinical indifference that had masked his features moments ago instantly vanished, replaced by a sharp, calculating recognition. He did not wait for me to come to him. He moved forward. In doing so, he walked right past Marcus. It was not a polite maneuver around a host. It was a physical dismissal. Sterling brushed past my father as if Marcus were nothing more than an inanimate obstacle, a decorative pillar occupying too much space on the floor. Marcus physically recoiled, his shoulders slumping as the gravitational pull of the room entirely abandoned him. Sterling stopped exactly 2 feet in front of me. He extended his large, calloused right hand. I met his gaze, my expression perfectly mirroring his own, and I took his hand. It was a firm, decisive grip. It was not a greeting between a wealthy investor and a begging entrepreneur. It was a handshake between two equal predators who understood the exact weight of the digital blood on their hands. "Commander Ray," Sterling said. The title echoed across the vaulted ceiling. He did not call me a girl. He did not call me an IT worker. He used my operational designation, injecting a level of absolute, unvarnished respect that sent a visible shockwave through the room. Around us, the elite guests were practically suffocating. I could see wealthy tech founders staring with their mouths slightly open. Evelyn was completely paralyzed, staring at the shattered crystal and spilled wine at her feet, her meticulously curated universe fracturing in real time. Chloe looked as if all the oxygen had been vacuumed directly from her lungs. But Marcus, driven by the desperate, blinding instinct of a man watching his ego burn to the ground, tried to salvage the ashes. He pushed himself back into the clearing, a nervous sheen of sweat now clearly visible on his forehead. He forced a wide, synthetic smile, attempting to stretch his arms out as if to embrace both the general and the situation. "Well, this is certainly a delightful surprise," Marcus interjected, his voice trembling despite his best efforts to project authority. "General Sterling, since you are already acquainted with my eldest, why do we not all retire to my private study? We can pour some vintage scotch and discuss the technology sector with both of my brilliant daughters. Chloe has some fascinating metrics to share." Sterling slowly turned his head. The look he gave my father was lethal. It was the look a predator gives to a remarkably stupid prey that has just wandered back into the trap. "Mr. Ray," Sterling began, his voice dropping an octave, resonating with a terrifying calmness. "I do not think you comprehend the situation. Our defense systems ran a preliminary diagnostic on the network traffic originating from this estate. We detected that the meditation application your daughter, Chloe, is currently parading around contains a massive critical backdoor vulnerability." Marcus opened his mouth to speak, but Sterling raised a single finger, silencing him instantly. "It is a backdoor that severely violates federal data security protocols," the general continued, his words striking like a hammer on an anvil. In fact, it was so poorly constructed and so deeply compromised that it acted as a beacon for the exact foreign network attack we suffered this morning. Kayla and her entire cyber division had to directly isolate and quarantine your daughter's server architecture just to prevent a catastrophic data breach. You are not building a wellness startup, Mr. Ray. You are manufacturing a piece of highly dangerous, defective garbage that actively threatens national security. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating weight that pressed down on the chests of everyone present. Chloe physically staggered backward, her hands flying to cover her mouth. The radiant commercial star of the Ray family was instantaneously reduced to a humiliated, terrified fraud in front of the most influential people in Austin. The guests, the investors who had been ready to write massive checks just 1 hour ago, were now physically stepping away from Chloe and Marcus, treating them like a highly contagious disease. I stood perfectly still, watching my father's face cycle through confusion, denial, and finally, sheer, unadulterated devastation. He had spent his entire life building a monument to superficiality. He had spent 30 years cultivating an empire of flawless optics and empty buzzwords, actively crushing me into the dirt to elevate a convenient lie. And now, I was watching that entire 30-year monument of lies burn down to its foundational ashes in exactly 30 seconds. I did not wait for the collective gasp of the room to fade. I simply turned my back on the wreckage of my family's reputation and gestured toward the west wing of the estate. "General, we should move to a secure location to discuss the patching metrics," I said, my voice entirely detached from the domestic drama unfolding around us. Sterling nodded once. We began to walk. The crowd of elite venture capitalists and tech luminaries physically parted for us, their eyes wide with a mixture of shock and sudden, desperate reverence. We walked past the paralyzed caterers, past the string quartet that had long since stopped playing, and headed straight for the heavy mahogany doors of Marcus's private study. As my hand touched the brass handle of the study door, I heard the frantic, heavy footsteps of my father rushing up behind us. Marcus was a drowning man desperately thrashing for a life raft. He could not process the reality that the ultimate prize he had lured into his home was currently walking away with the daughter he had spent decades treating like an embarrassing afterthought. "Gentlemen, Kayla," Marcus breathed out. His face flushed a deep, panicked red as he attempted to slide past Sterling's 2 massive bodyguards. "Let me just step in and pour us some drinks. As the patriarch of the house, I can facilitate this discussion. Perhaps we can explore some synergies between your defense needs and my investment portfolio." He reached for the door handle. He did not make it. The lead bodyguard moved with blinding speed, interposing his solid frame between my father and the doorway. He did not draw a weapon, but the sheer kinetic threat of his movement caused Marcus to freeze instantly. Sterling paused at the threshold. He turned his head slowly, looking at my father with an expression of polite yet absolute professional execution. "Apologies, Mr. Ray," the general stated, his tone perfectly even, civilized, yet entirely lethal. "This briefing requires a Level 6 security clearance. You are not qualified to step into your own study as long as we are inside." Marcus stood completely paralyzed, his jaw slackened. The patriarchal authority he had wielded over me like a blunt instrument for 29 years evaporated into the cold air. I stepped into the room, and the bodyguard firmly pulled the heavy mahogany door shut, the latch clicking into place with a definitive, metallic finality right in my father's face. The interior of the study was lined with dark leather and imported oak. It was a room Marcus used to intimidate young startup founders with his wealth and booming voice. Tonight, it was just a soundproof box for a real conversation. Sterling took a seat in one of the vintage wingback chairs. I did not sit behind my father's massive desk. I chose the chair directly opposite the general, maintaining an equal horizontal line of sight. The quarantine protocols on the satellite grid are holding at 100%, I reported simply, bypassing any superficial small talk. Sterling waved his hand dismissively. I am not here to discuss the patch, Commander. I already read your after-action report. It was flawless. I am here because the Department of Defense is hemorrhaging talent to the private sector, and our current infrastructure is bleeding. I am building a new centralized command division. I want you to run it. I leaned back against the leather, studying his face. Define the parameters. National Cybersecurity Strategy Director, Sterling replied without a single second of hesitation. You will have a multi-billion-dollar operating budget. You will report directly to me and the Secretary of Defense. No bureaucratic red tape, no middle management interfering with your architecture. It was the kind of offer that would make any tech executive in the living room outside weep with joy. It was the absolute pinnacle of the mountain. Yet, sitting there, I felt no overwhelming surge of emotion. I felt only the cold, sharp clarity of a system architect calculating a risk assessment. I do not want a corner office in the Pentagon, I stated, my voice steady, unyielding. I possess none of the weak, subservient posture my family assumed I had. I do not want to attend press conferences, and I will not waste my time briefing politicians who do not understand basic encryption protocols. If I take this position, I require absolute, unquestioned control over all personnel hiring and firing. I choose my engineers. I design the infrastructure from the ground up. If I detect a vulnerability, I shut down the affected system immediately, and I do not ask for permission from a committee. Sterling looked at me for a long, silent moment. The ghost of a deeply satisfied smile played at the corners of his mouth. He was not looking at a fragile, invisible daughter. He was looking at a warlord who understood her exact market value. You have full operational control, Commander, he agreed smoothly. Consider the division yours. We spent exactly 45 minutes inside that room. We mapped out the initial framework for a shadow division that would fundamentally alter the landscape of American cyber defense. We discussed high-level encryption standards, zero-trust network architectures, and the immediate termination of obsolete defense contracts. It was a brutally efficient, deeply satisfying conversation between two people who spoke the exact same language of power and security. But the true masterpiece of the evening was not the promotion I had just secured. The true masterpiece was the psychological warfare occurring on the other side of that locked mahogany door. For 45 agonizing minutes, the Ray family was subjected to a public execution of their social standing. Through the thick, soundproofed walls of the study, I knew exactly how the scene was playing out in the grand living room. The party had completely derailed. The carefully curated aesthetic had shattered into a million irreparable pieces. The elite guests, the very people Marcus and Evelyn had spent decades trying to impress, were no longer interested in Chloe or her fraudulent application. They were standing in hushed clusters, casting sidelong glances at the closed study door, whispering furiously about the invisible genius daughter who had just commanded the absolute submission of a military titan. They realized that they had been courting the wrong side of the family. Marcus was pacing the hallway, entirely locked out of his own inner sanctum, stripped of his title as the master of the house. Evelyn was paralyzed in the center of the room, unable to curate a fake smile, unable to draft a social media post to spin the monumental disaster. Her digital empire of perfection was bleeding out on the expensive white rug. And Chloe, the golden child, was forced to stand in the wreckage of her hollow startup, exposed as a severe security liability to the entire technology sector. The wall of illusion my family had built to keep me in the dark had not just been breached, it had been systematically detonated from the inside. By the time the heavy mahogany doors finally opened and General Sterling stepped out, the extravagant dinner party had already bled to death. The string quartet had long since packed away their instruments. The caterers had vanished into the kitchens. The few elite guests who had lingered in the grand foyer were no longer interested in venture capital or wellness applications. When Sterling departed, accompanied by his security detail, the remaining tech luminaries and investors did not look at my father. They lined up to shake my hand. They offered me their business cards, their voices hushed with newfound, desperate reverence. Marcus and Chloe were entirely invisible to them. When the heavy front doors finally closed behind the last guest, a suffocating, echoing silence fell over the house. The grand living room was a battlefield of abandoned crystal glasses and stained cocktail napkins. I walked back into the center of the room. My family was standing amidst the wreckage of their social empire, desperately trying to reboot a system that had already crashed. Marcus was the first to attempt to establish a new fabricated reality. He rubbed his face, forcing a weak, completely hollow chuckle. "Well," Marcus began, his voice lacking all of its usual booming authority, "I always knew you had incredible hidden talent, Kayla. I just cannot fathom why you did not tell me you were intimately acquainted with General Sterling. We could have leveraged that connection." I looked at the man who had spent my entire life treating me like a defective piece of hardware. I did not raise my voice. I spoke with the icy precision of a surgeon making a final incision. "I left my comprehensive project report on your office desk exactly 3 years ago," I replied, the words striking him like physical blows. "I detailed my entire operational portfolio. You used that folder to prop up the uneven leg of your imported coffee table. I never hid anything from you, Marcus. You simply never bothered to open your eyes." Evelyn immediately deployed her final desperate defense mechanism. She pressed her hands to her face, forcing a sudden dramatic sob. Tears ruined her flawless makeup. "That is so unfair, Kayla," Evelyn cried, her voice trembling with synthetic victimhood. "Sending you down to the basement was just a logistical arrangement. I was trying to protect you. I know how much you hate the pressure of these high society parties. I was shielding you." I cut her off. I did not need to yell to completely dismantle her lie. "You did not protect me," I stated, my gaze locking her in place. "You protected your fragile, perfect facade. You protected the illusion of a flawless family because the reality of a daughter who operates outside your shallow metrics was too inconvenient. And tonight, I let a 4-star general tear that facade to pieces on your own pristine carpet." Chloe was trembling. The golden child was entirely stripped of her artificial glow. She took a hesitant step toward me, her eyes wide with genuine panic. "Kayla, please," Chloe begged, her voice cracking. "The investors pulled their funding. The entire network knows my application is compromised. You have to help me. You are a senior architect. You can write a patch to clean up the back-end security fallout, right?" I looked at my younger sister, feeling absolutely nothing. No pity, no vindication, just the cold calculation of an engineer identifying a fatal flaw. "That is a core system error, Chloe," I explained quietly. "You cannot patch a foundation built entirely on stolen code and fake promises. You have to tear the entire application down and build it from scratch, exactly like the way this family operates. I do not provide technical support for deceit." I turned my back on them. I walked over to the velvet chair and picked up my dark coat. I did not wait for an apology. I knew that any apology from them would merely be a tactical maneuver, a desperate attempt to regain control over the one asset they had just realized was valuable. I did not need their validation anymore. I walked straight toward the massive front door, the exact threshold my mother had explicitly forbidden me from standing near just a few hours ago. As I stepped out into the cool Texas night, I took a deep breath. For 29 years, The invisibility they forced upon me felt like a cage. Tonight, I realized it was the greatest superpower they could have ever handed me. The loud, the proud, and the vain are always blinded by the spotlight. It is the person standing quietly in the dark who sees the entire board. I walked down the long driveway, got into my car, and started the engine. I was heading to my new headquarters to build a digital fortress. I left my family standing in their mansion, trapped inside a corrupted system that could never, ever be recovered. Thank you so much, dear listeners, for staying with me until the very end of this journey. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today, so please let me know in the comments. If you found today's story engaging and want to help our channel survive, please consider supporting us with just $1. You can scan the PayPal QR code currently on your screen, or use the PayPal link located in the description or the pinned comment. Your generous support allows us to pay our dedicated staff so they can provide for their families and continue creating better, more thrilling stories for you every single day. Thank you, and stay strong.